All right, well, welcome everybody. It's 2 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name's Chris Claus, and I'm proud to be with the Missouri Rehabilitation Association. And I'm excited today to welcome you to the second installment of our Webinar Wednesday that we've been doing here at MRA. As many of you know, we were unable to have an in-person conference this year, but Jennifer Kincaid, our current president, and others have done some great work to bring some of our speakers to us who were planning to be with us at the lake. So just a comment or two here before we start. Just wanted to let everyone know that we're having a little bit of difficulty with the captioning. So instead of the captioning appearing in the caption box like you're used to, if you click the link in the chat box, it will open an external URL where the captioning will appear. We apologize for that, but technology wasn't cooperating today. We're fortunate to be able to still have the captioning. It's just going to happen kind of outside of the Zoom software for us. The other topic that I want to bring up real quick here is CEUs. We will be offering CEUs, and I'll explain that there at the end. I'll explain how to access those CEUs. So with that, let me go ahead and get going here. We are pleased to have Brittany Peterson here today, and Brittany's gonna talk to us about job development, navigating an inclusive workforce with collateral consequences. Brittany is the lead resource specialist and training facilitator with the Second Chance Risk Reduction Center. Brittany is a graduate of Graceland University with dual degrees in international studies and sociology with a minor in specializations in peace studies and political science. So we are very excited and thrilled that Brittany can join us today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brittany. Oh, I think you're on. I think I muted you, Brittany. I'm sorry. There we go.
Okay, thanks everyone. Again, with just a few temporary technical difficulties, we will navigate this together successfully, I promise. So my name is Brittany Peterson. I am the lead here at the Second Chance Risk Reduction Center in Kansas City, Missouri. We are a program of the Kansas City Metropolitan Crime Commission. I'm sure that there are several of you that have heard me speak before. I speak at a lot of conferences and I do a lot of trainings. Can you all hear me okay? Sorry, my director just walked in to tell me to speak up and I'm pretty loud. First and foremost, why I am the one talking to you about reentry, employment, and workforce development. I hold a number of unique certifications for the Midwest. I am a train-the-trainer for the National Institute of Corrections. With that, I am a certified offender workforce development specialist, an offender employment retention specialist, an employment retention specialist for criminal justice. I am a train-the-trainer for OWD, OER, RES, and ERS. The rest of the acronyms don't necessarily mean anything. I merely point that out because I am very involved in reentry and criminal justice reform in Kansas City Metro specifically. And my intention to speaking with you today is to hopefully motivate you and give a call to action so that some more momentum can occur in your communities as well. As I'm getting started, I would encourage all of you to go ahead and use the chat box function. The captioner and the rest of the rehabilitation team is going to help keep me on track so that I can try to answer as many of your questions as they come about rather than waiting and answering them out of context at the end. There will be a point at the end of today's discussion where I'm asking for feedback from you, ideas from you and your communities on how we can move the ball forward with opening up fair hiring practices in Missouri statewide. That way, Kansas City is not unique for our state. Okay. Let's see if I can move it. Second Chance is a program of the Kansas City Metropolitan Crime Commission. I would be remiss not to talk about our parent company. We are very unique, especially considering the political environment that we find ourselves in 2020. The Crime Commission is certainly in support of law enforcement. SAFE is a program, one of our sister programs, that provides financial and resource assistance to members that have fallen in the line of duty, first responders. So that includes law enforcement, EMT, and fire departments. And we also help support minor children up to the age of majority. Very unique there. The Crime Stoppers program is probably one of the more well-known programs under our parent umbrella. TIPS Hotline happens to be that model there. So we're holding the community accountable and trying to deter crime as well as help solve crime. If anyone's been paying attention, we know that Kansas City and St. Louis are seeing a huge spike in crime, in violent crime, and in homicide specifically in 2020 this year. Crime Stoppers works very intimately with local police forces in order to get those crimes solved. The next program, and probably a little bit closer in theory to our reentry model, is the Metropolitan Community Service Program. They help individuals to complete community service as ordered by courts. What we know in the model of criminal justice is that the poor are offered fines even without the ability to pay. So we've tried to educate courts and judges specifically to offer community service so that help in the community, and especially in blighted communities, is being offered in lieu of a financial consequence that way. And then our program, the Second Chance Risk Reduction, we specialize in helping individuals on Missouri, state, probation, or parole to successfully reintegrate back in the community. About 80% of the individuals that we serve are on parole, which means that they have done some sort of prison incarceration at some point. And you can take a look at our mission statement over here. The work that we do is a lot more than just serving clients on supervision. It really is motivating change in the community and putting criminal justice reform at the forefront. What I want to talk to you about today is, first and foremost, understanding who it is that's incarcerated and who's coming home to our communities. With that is not just understanding crime, but understanding the underlying issues. And for those of you that are working in the rehabilitation field, this information is going to be even more relevant for you, because we need to have a conversation about what the underlying issues are going on that need to be addressed. 2020 has been an interesting year, so I want to have a conversation about workforce trends and what statistics look like in 2020. I was joking with Jennifer a couple of months ago when we knew that we were moving this to virtual that, boy, the conversation changed, because we went from record low unemployment to record high unemployment. And there is still a way to motivate change and create positive momentum in our communities as well. I'm going to have a conversation about local criminal justice reform initiatives that are occurring in the Kansas City metro area, and then have a group conversation about how we can move some of those same initiatives to your communities, create similar momentum behind that, so that we are empowering our community and we are welcoming people with criminal records home, so that they aren't committing new crimes and they're actually helping to positively contribute to our local economies. So the United States has about 5% of the world's population. However, we have incarcerated at any given point 20% of the people incarcerated worldwide. This graph here doesn't necessarily reflect quite as much of what mass incarceration looks like, but I really wanted to give you a better understanding of the problem of incarceration in the United States itself. We don't need to have a political conversation right now, because the reality exists that 20% of the world's prisoners live in the United States. So looking at young generations, if you were to be born in the year of 2001, so you'd be, what, 19 years old, your likelihood of incarceration is staggering. And a lot of that has to do with sentencing policy and some old laws that need to be changed in order to get up to date. Of all the men that were born and living in 2001, the likelihood of one day being incarcerated is 1 in 9. But the racial disparity really goes a lot deeper than that. You will notice that as a Black man, you have a 1 in 3 chance of one day being incarcerated yourself. For women, it's 1 in 56, and for Black women, it's 1 in 18. So there are definite disparities in who is being incarcerated in the United States. From the second chance perspective, the state of Missouri, the African-American community comprises about 25% of our population in the state of Missouri. What we see in Kansas City is that about 65% of the people that we serve in this program are African-American. So if sentencing was equal, we should see only about 25% of individuals, persons of color, were being served in the program, but that's just not the reality that we see. There is a lot that goes into trauma, and incarceration is traumatic. The lifestyle and the realities in communities leading up to incarceration, and honestly leading up to being involved in crime, is staggering. Now, I'm sure there are a number of you that are familiar with ACE in the traditional sense, the adverse childhood experience, but what I want to introduce to you is a newer concept of adverse community environments. These are the types of experiences, the injustices that exist in the soil as represented by the tree. And the exact same experiences that exist in the communities with high police presence and with high rates of incarceration, such as poverty, lack of opportunity, and economic mobility. In Kansas City alone, we have the red line district along Troost, where if you live to the west of Troost, you probably make a higher income than those individuals that live east of Troost. And I'm sure there are similarities in some of the communities that you live in as well. There's discrimination in employment. There's community disruption. Community disruption alone is someone being removed and incarcerated because that individual may have actually been a mentor, may have been a person of influence for economic movement and social justice reform in their community as well. There's incredibly poor housing quality and affordability in some of these impoverished neighborhoods, and obviously violence. We all can agree that there are some neighborhoods that experience disproportionate rates of violence as well. These social inequity conversations bleed poison into the soil, which then affect the growth of the leaves that we see in the idea of the traditional ACE, where we're seeing higher rates of domestic violence, substance misuse, emotional and sexual abuse, maternal depression, emotional neglect, divorce, mental illness, incarceration, and homelessness. So it ends up being a vicious cycle. And I would certainly encourage all of you to check out the pair of ACEs research in order to dive a little bit deeper if you have any inclination for understanding what is happening from a scientific perspective in our communities here. What this means for all intents and purposes here, and this visual actually comes from the UK, but it's certainly relevant to our conversation today. ACE manifests itself in action into adulthood. With 4 or more ACEs, you are 3 times as likely to develop certain health-related issues, such as lung disease and adult smoking. It's a stress response as well. I think there's a statistic like 4,800% more likely to one day be an IV drug user with a score of 4 or more ACEs. We're also seeing all of these other issues in here too. For those persons that are incarcerated, there is a stark percentage of them that score as a 4 or more. On the contrary, for those of us that work in the helping community, there are many of us that score rather high on the ACE scale as well. So maybe take into consideration why we got into this and how close maybe we would have been one day to be incarcerated ourselves. The reality of coming home from incarceration, because 99% of people that are incarcerated will one day return to their community. If it's not their home community, they're choosing another community to go to. And there's all kinds of things that are keeping them from being attached and being a positive influence on the people around them, including internal, societal, correctional, criminogenic, and perceived barriers. I don't want to go into my training facilitation mode to really be breaking down what each of these things are, but we're barely scratching the surface of all of the muck that is standing in front of someone from staying out of prison. It's a vicious cycle and a revolving door. We hear stories all the time about someone returning to prison because they just couldn't make it in the community. For our purposes today, I really am going to be talking more about employment barriers and the community and societal-based barriers. 57% mental health is certainly a barrier. 57% are diagnosed with a mental health issue. But the reality is that our prisons in the state of Missouri are wildly underfunded, and the access to mental and behavioral health resources are just lacking, which means these issues are going unaddressed, but they're also issues that you as rehabilitation specialists have to look at in eligibility for services with VR as well. Same thing with substance misuse. Prison is not the place for addicts, but that's where we put them because we've decided as a society to stop funding mental health and inpatient resources. Instead, we double up our responsibility inside of prison, and that's where people detox a lot of the time. And they're not gaining the skills necessary in order to understand how to stay sober and clean in the community once they're released. So that's where we see a lot of our recidivism. Recidivism being the return to incarceration. With employment, there's all kinds of collateral consequences associated with having a felony record and trying to access gainful and fair employment. I use the term gainful employment because minimum wage is not gainful employment. You cannot pay your bills on minimum wage, which unfortunately was the entire concept of why we established a federal minimum wage years ago. But statistically, 72% of those persons coming home will return to incarceration if they're not employed. Education as well. A lot of individuals leave school because of their communities, because of that community experience we discussed in the pair of ACEs, and only 37% return to incarceration if they do have an education. So a stark difference with employment, with education, mental health access, and sobriety in the community. We can really move the ball forward if we're addressing the things that reentry programs understand, that vocational rehabilitation understands, so that we can empower our community to move in a better direction. What it means for us in terms of incarceration is that there are 1 in 15, working age adults with a criminal record, which means there are constant barriers in their face in accessing a fair and livable wage. With that, there are children that are at risk as well. Being a child of incarcerated parent means that you are 80% more likely to one day be incarcerated yourself, times 2.7 million children in the United States. I'm sorry, I don't have a Missouri statistic or even a local Kansas City, Missouri statistic, but it's staggering because those children are missing out on fatherhood, on motherhood, on the right mentoring and the direction, and oftentimes are being entered into the foster care system, which has its entirely own set of traumas and barriers associated with being successful in adulthood themselves. What we do with the millions of people that we incarcerate each year, and as they're released and the community still pays for them to be on parole, is we're spending $80 billion a year on incarceration. What people fail to realize is the missed economic opportunity in GDP by not allowing people to get back to work. What that amounts to is $78 to $87 billion in missed tax revenue. People forget to talk about the economic impact of incarceration in that capacity. We talk about the economic impact of crime in our community, and there's a valid point there. But the same argument needs to be made about allowing people to come home and be members of their community. 2020 has certainly given us a run for our money. I pulled these statistics from RWIN, so locally the Regional Workforce Intelligence Network, who I sit on their task force with. So you can see the trends over the last 5 years. It looked real pretty, and when I originally was planning to speak to you, it was gonna be maybe a little bit more positive message, but essentially the same, that we need to move our communities in the right direction. Now we're seeing record high unemployment rates. It's staggering. So if people without a criminal record are struggling to engage in the workforce, imagine the depraved statistics that exist with those persons with criminal records and that are just coming home to the community and trying to figure out what life in a new existence looks like entirely. No questions yet? Okay. By industry sector, the loss of opportunity, and again, this is Kansas City metro area, I don't have statewide statistics. We're looking at a lot of different industries that are traditionally more inclusive in fair hiring practices. When I say fair hiring practices, I mean that individuals with criminal records and other high-risk factors such as mental health, substance misuse, SNAP and TANF recipients, long-term unemployment, SSI, and veterans all fall into the high-risk category. All of these industries happen to be industries that are very common to participate in with this designation. Most importantly, with trade, transportation, manufacturing, and leisure and hospitality. Leisure and hospitality, probably not surprisingly, has been the hardest hit in our metro area here on the west side of the state. So we have to be creative with the way that we're going about allowing people to return home. What I'm going to talk to you about now, that we've kind of done a little bit of a depressing warm-up here, is what I suggest we start doing differently. There are new approaches that we have been attempting here in the metro area that is seeing incredible success. Case management models. I tried scrolling through as my rehabilitation people were letting people into the room, and I saw some familiar names, some people that have been in training rooms with me and have received certification from the NIC from me. A true case management approach means collaboration. We're not having a conversation about cooperation. I think that cooperation is easy, but true collaboration is an entirely different concept. Case management teams mean bringing all of the pieces together and working as a true community to address the needs of the community member. The way that we start doing this is having a conversation with people that make decisions. In 2016, I was part of a team that worked with the city of Kansas City to move forward a municipal order on Ban the Box. Now, Columbia had Ban the Box for private employers for quite some time, but what we did locally in Kansas City, Missouri was innovative because it was not only on employment, but also on rental applications as well. We all patted ourselves on the back and were really excited about getting that ordinance moved forward, but then nothing happened. There was no enforcement. And municipal ordinances are only good in word if there's nothing to be done on actually implementing these concepts. We've also removed some barriers in licensing, which is the collateral consequence there. You can't get a liquor license in Kansas City, Missouri, if you have a certain kind of felony or if it's a recent one. And the food and beverage industry is an incredibly lucrative, prior to 2020, industry for people as they're coming home. Doesn't exist in Kansas City, Kansas. It doesn't exist in Gladstone or in Independence or any of the other municipalities, but Kansas City, Missouri, for some reason, you can't get a simple license in order to serve food. We also have been working on a lot of community education, having similar conversations, bringing together cooperatives and task forces in order to address not only violence, but the collateral consequences and ban the box implementation. With that is the next conversation on justice reinvestment, utilizing federal dollars at a local level in order to work on this collaborative measure to address community needs as a whole. Without enforcement on any of these items, it's a moot point. I am not usually the type of person that waits for someone to do it. I like to pick up the arm myself and hold people accountable. So I approached the Chamber of Commerce a number of years ago when I was getting really discouraged about the lack of enforcement on Ban the Box. And we developed and rolled out an initiative in 2020 called the WORK Initiative. WORK stands for Workforce Opportunities for Returning Citizens. In the next slide, I will show you some of the language on that collaborative effort there. But what we've done is we've pulled together a number of stakeholders that hadn't previously been having a conversation. The Chamber of Commerce and business persons. Business persons that have employment opportunities that hadn't previously been offered to individuals with criminal records. We're bringing in the professionals in the industry, the reentry partners, the people that are working hands on hand to try to stabilize people as they're coming out of incarceration. Probation and parole needs to be part of the conversation because they're the ones responsible for the supervision and success or violation of the people that are on supervision in our community. And we've brought to the table the people involved. It is an unfortunate occurrence that happens all the time where people will start having conversations and make up plans for people without those involved being at the table. We've changed that. So with this project, and I'm actually happy to send out a PDF if anyone else is interested in having this information. This is the literature that we put out in the community on what has been happening. Convening, educating, collaborating, and advocating. We are advocating for change. We have a legislative agenda that goes in front of committees in Jefferson City in order to advocate for actual legislation statewide and locally in the Kansas City metro area in order to reduce some of these issues that we were talking about back here. But instead of just having conversations, we're actually working on projects together. And it is a true case management model. We will be doing continual education of business partners so that word of mouth can go on and they can tell their buddies down the street, hey, I had a really good experience. Maybe we've been wrong about this all along. Maybe we have an investment and a responsibility in the community to help someone have an easier time reintegrating back in the community. It's going to be a little bit difficult for you to see our timeline down here. Our timeline got strongly adjusted because of 2020. We had all kinds of exciting initiatives going on, and a lot of it's been virtual, Zoom, same as I am talking to all of you right now. but we've still been able to get a lot of that done. And what we missed out this year because of the unfortunate virus pandemic, we will pick up and we will continue the momentum forward. This works. With historic unemployment rates, I'm telling you this works. This is a snapshot of the database that I take care of for our Second Chance Risk Reduction Center here. What I want to point out here on the right is at this point in first quarter in 2019, we were at a 72.5% employment rate. It's admirable. I'm certainly not ashamed of nearly 73% employment rate for everyone with rather serious felony convictions. But what I want to point out is at the same point, first quarter in 2020, when our unemployment rate should be in the gutter, it's actually higher. And that's something to be said, because where we should be strongly struggling and having to extra think outside the box on how we help the justice involved to be gainfully employed, we are seeing successes. Because instead of rolling over and playing dead, we are working with the community and we are going to the stakeholders to have a conversation about economics and what their investment is, rather than the bleeding heart story that a lot of us often tell. Building healthier communities does build a stronger economy. You may remember one of the previous slides, the $78 to $87 billion that we're missing on GDP opportunity. Gainful employment for the justice involved means we as taxpayers are not paying for them to be incarcerated. In the state of Missouri, we pay $21,000 a year for one person to be in prison. What we're looking at is them paying taxes. On the very few numbers that we can pull, my director and I have crunched some numbers, and we're looking at, just based off of the 160 people serviced off of one of our grants, there's a potential for $32 million a year on taxpayer savings. Wouldn't we like to have extra money in our state budget to go to justice reinvestment, to work on education, to work on rehabilitation, to maybe fund some opportunities on better mental health, on inpatient and substance abuse recovery, to invest into infrastructure? My goodness, to not have a winter where the roads in Kansas City explode with potholes. There's opportunity where we can heal our communities, and all we have to do is work smarter, not harder. Work collaboratively, not just cooperatively. We play friendly, and that's all great and good, but we really need to be breaking out of our organizational silos. Sharing communication, working on public and community initiatives, and moving the ball forward. It's a personal change for an individual, let alone an organization, but it's also about accountability. I can speak for my own experience, but there are some community partners that say that they do good work, but if you look closely enough, you're not real sure that that's the work that they're doing. And when we move out of these organizational silos and we really start working more collaboratively, our funding dollars go farther, our accountability is higher, and we will certainly see all of our program successes increase astronomically. The potential for this is that we upend all of these negative statistics that I started out talking to you about, and we get closer to healing some of the social and community ills that we've been experiencing through our entire history as a country. If 1 in 15 working age adults has a criminal record, they have fewer barriers on being able to legitimately provide for their families. Maybe their children don't enter the foster care system at such an incredible rate. Maybe those children reduce their ACE score so that they one day themselves don't fall into the trap of substance misuse. Maybe we see a reduction in mental health issues. Maybe we see healthier relationships. fewer occurrences of domestic violence, of sexual violence, and we're adding tax dollars to our economy so that every dream that we have that we want to accomplish as a nation, as a state, as a metro area becomes possible because we decided to do something about it. So now it's your responsibility. What ideas do you have as participants in this discussion about how you start to motivate some momentum in your own community? If you want to raise your hand, that way we can kind of moderate, but I'm certainly open to feedback and anyone else that wants to join in on this conversation. Maybe no one's listening.
Hopefully folks can unmute themselves. So feel free to give us a sign if you have a comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking of speaking to our Chamber of Commerce luncheon about some of these topics that you brought up today, because like right now, my caseload, most of it is an individual that not only do they have a disability, but they have a barrier to employment because of a criminal background.
Yeah.
So, and hardly anyone in my area of the state understands or even has heard of federal bonding.
You're familiar though, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. Federal bonding and the work opportunity tax credits are all incentives for employers. What we need to be careful about doing though, Janelle, is having that bleeding heart conversation, because people are really drained with that right now. So part of this right now is providing an argument to an audience based on what they're going to be willing to receive. And money is what they're interested in. I love the idea of you going to your local chamber to talk to a board meeting, to talk to a staff meeting, something, because honestly, that's how the conversation started for us locally as well. But have an economic conversation. Do you feel like you have the resources in your area in order to pull some of the statistics necessary?
Maybe not by myself, but I think with a couple of someone helping with me, we can get that together, whether it's someone internally within Goodwill who I work for or someone at Workforce Development.
Great, great. That's exactly the type of thing that I'm asking for you to start thinking about, because if we want to work smarter, not harder, we have to bring other people into our case management team. Anyone else have ideas?
So I've talked to other CRPs about the federal bonding program, about when they are helping my clients look for jobs who have legal histories, and they seem like they don't want to do that because they feel like it's gonna put the employer off.
Okay. I think that's an opportunity to better educate, a way to present the information. Do you know how the information is being presented to the client base already?
No, I'm not sure what they're saying or anything, but I mean, I thought it was a really good idea. I mean, like,
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the barrier is. I mean, I don't know.
So in my experience, employers locally don't care so much about the federal bonding as what they do, the WOTC, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, because everyone likes getting a little bit of a tax break, especially when it comes to company investment there. If you try moving away from the conversation of federal bonding and try moving closer to the conversation of WOTC, I think you'll see an interesting momentum there. There's also training dollars in the community because of the Justice Reinvestment Act that will provide training dollars to employers to train and get ready these individuals with a high risk backgrounds. And for those of you that are working Goodwill and vocational rehabilitation, you're not working just with the population that I am presenting with the criminal background and the mental health and the substance abuse and all these other things, but they may not have a criminal history, and they may just be presenting with a need to get re-engaged in the workforce. And it's a weird time to be working on some of that economic development, or maybe it's the perfect time, because what we're seeing in the data is that employers are trying to re-engage employment, but employees are struggling to engage. So how do we take those two ideas and we merge in order to create movement in the community? Do you have the information, Starla, on the WOTC programming? Because again, I'm happy to send all that information over that can be blasted out to anyone that would like the information.
I'm sure I have it, but I don't know if I have it at the tip of my finger. So if you could send it out, that would be fabulous.
Happy to do that. It's so easy to share information and to make sure that those of you that are interested in adding to your toolbox have those tools at your disposal.
My name is Karen Dean, and lately I noticed that Missouri employers have been a little relaxed with hiring felons because they realized they were missing skilled employers. But the barriers to the employers that I run into is the housing market. Like renters are really strict on about renting to felons. And, you know, felons tend to find themselves renting in high crime areas that kind of set them up. So I was just kind of, what suggestions do you have where we could get started with the changing laws with rental?
Community education. Go out and educate private landlords specifically. It's exactly what we've done here at the Second Chance Risk Reduction Center. We have relationships with more than 50 different landlords, both property management companies and private landlords. And a lot of those relationships started by having a conversation. So with us, accountability is huge, and turning someone's life around is important. That really is our mission. In order to be successful, in order to really leverage opportunity, you as a program, you as an advocate, you as a change agent needs to have that Rolodex of individuals that are willing to take that chance. And it all comes down to education. If there is an argument to be made on employment instability and look at the change, that's really where that starts.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else with feedback or an idea, a concept of what you might be able to do in your local community?
I don't have so much an idea, but I do have a question of if there has been an idea done elsewhere in the state. One of the things that we run into where I'm at is that we can find housing for felons, but the problem is the jobs they're getting are low paying unless they're willing to do very hard work, in which case they usually can't do it for too long. But the housing market, the prices just keep rising. And even if they're not living in good housing, the landlords still keep raising the rents at exponential rates just year to year. It's getting kind of crazy. So I was wondering if there are any initiatives or anything out there to try to stabilize the housing market for individuals who have those felonies, because they really have so many and very limited places on where they can go. And the problem is that oftentimes I find that the landlords catch on to that and almost take it hostage in a way.
I absolutely hear you resoundingly on the issues that you presented there. Michelle, can I ask what community you're in?
I'm in Springfield.
Okay. So having a standard for your clients. Minimum wage, again, isn't going to pay anything. Educating employers is going to be huge. Getting the Chamber of Commerce behind you and supporting economic development in your community is going to be huge. The minimum rate of pay that we will even allow a client to accept is $12 an hour. The average rate of pay for any client working the Second Chance program is $13.86. So you can understand that there are some outliers, but we've really upped the ante on expectations. And that comes down to employer engagement and employer education. I haven't hesitated to stop working with an employer if they refuse to pay a livable wage. And the argument always comes back to, if they can't afford to have a safe and healthy home life, why would they take the risk to invest all of their time working for you? Accountability is huge. There are some initiatives here locally in Kansas City. There's a group called KC Tenants that has made a lot of great progress on the housing market, because we're seeing the same thing here in Kansas City, where rent continues to skyrocket and a lot of employers aren't participating in the same increase in rate of pay. However, the employers that we partner with and that we work with here at Second Chance, we've seen an equal growth in that. So it's community education, it's advocacy, and it's building those case management teams. I absolutely appreciate that I'm asking you to take on this whole other set of social justice and criminal justice advocacy, but it's only work up front to make your work and your legacy a huge impact for thousands of more people coming home to your community to come. Developing the networks, developing the cohorts so that this opportunity grows in momentum statewide. What we're doing with the Chamber of Commerce here locally is a bi-state initiative as well. We actually have a really exciting project that we're getting ready to start with the Kansas Department of Corrections that I'm just not comfortable speaking out loud about right now because it's not public knowledge. This work opportunity is public knowledge at this point. It's getting out, laying the groundwork so that employment is being addressed and landlords have to be held accountable as well. Our local health department actually has an investigation where they're holding landlords accountable. They're fining them if repairs aren't being made, if there's mold, if the utilities aren't being hooked up. And that was a huge step in the right direction. And then the next piece is also working with the Chamber of Commerce on the legislative and policy arm in order to create ordinance and policy that does not allow this exorbitant skyrocketing of rent that is out of pace with economic development. Especially in a year where we're seeing record unemployment, how dare you raise the rent? How dare you lessen the opportunity for individuals that are struggling to have a safe roof over their head? I don't know if that helped out at all, Michelle.
I think it does, and knowing that there are things to do, because I would personally have been afraid to think about reaching out to the Public Health Board, because I have even people who are on low income and public housing assistants who they don't mention any repairs that are needed because they're afraid of getting kicked out because the place may not do the repairs, but then the housing assistance may not come through. So knowing that it has worked elsewhere gives me some hope that maybe we could try something like that here.
That's what the whole intention of my discussion today was to get you thinking about how you do some similar things. The project with the Chamber on the work initiative and the work that Second Chance itself has done in the community is about look at what's happening, look at the impact that it's already making, do the same. Your community deserves the same. Is there anyone else that has input?
Is there a chance to get like the flyers that goes out about Second Chance programs in our area?
So we are Second Chance in name. Our whole concept was based off of the 2008 Second Chance Act that was originally signed in by President George Bush. And then the Obama legacy actually made into implementation during his 8-year administration. To my knowledge, there's not a Second Chance in other communities. There are other reentry programs in your community. I take pride in that what we do here locally with the Crime Commission and the Second Chance Risk Reduction Center is very unique. I am happy to do any consulting that you need. I do a lot of consulting here in our metro area as well, because we believe in moving criminal justice reform and community development forward. So Karen, if you want to send me a message privately, you are welcome to. That does bring me to this so that I can have this up on the screen for a little while longer. If anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I certainly encourage you to do so. I am a training facilitator for the National Institute of Corrections. Everything that we do here locally is evidence-based, theory and practice, and how we create healing in our community. I firmly stand by every single principle that I spoke to you about today, and I am happy to share the love, even if you're not in our own community, so long as my director doesn't tell me to quit offering services. I do see in the chat box that a lot of you are interested in the PDFs and the information that I presented today. My plan is to get it to Jennifer and her team that help put all of this conference information together so that they can be responsible on getting a large blast out to all of you. And then if you have individual items, feel free to reach out to me directly. All of my information is on the current screen. In order to be respectful of everyone's time though, if there are any final questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, hopes or dreams?
If I can for a second, I work up in the Northland of Kansas City. I used to be with probation and parole for a while, and actually I have directed several of my offenders to Second Chance, and they have had some good success with them. So I've seen this presentation kind of before, but I did want to back up a little bit of what you said and a lot of the education that has to go into it.
The education goes in with probation and parole though too.
Yeah.
Getting rid of the old thinking of, oh, they're coming out, I just got to figure out how long until I send them back.
Right.
No,
that
we
was kind
want
of the
you
thing.
in the community.
That was kind of the thing with us, is that we were always directing them to find jobs. They were having difficulty finding jobs. And, you know, unfortunately, offender job fairs don't happen that often. And then even then the list is still very sporadic and it's not accurate. So I directed 3 or 4 people to Second Chance, and I know it had good effect on them. They were positive through probation and parole through that aspect.
Thank you for that feedback.
Hello, Brittany. This is Timothy Jackson. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not.
Hi, Timothy. Yes.
Yes. It's a pleasure to hear from you and be a part of this. And
I was hoping you were in on this because this is a call to action for you, Timothy.
Great. Good to hear. First, I was just going to give you some kudos on what you guys have been doing with Second Chance and the Kansas City Crime Commission. I know I've worked with you on a couple of different occasions and had some counselors come and speak, I think, specifically at some of your welcome home sessions or welcome back sessions. We talked about Missouri Vocational Rehabilitation Services and business services as well. But I believe you posed a good question about the next steps. Of course, you mentioned the word that I think is right on point is community engagement and business engagement. It's going to take more of us coming together, collaborating on these resources for these individuals and presenting platforms for these employers to gather this knowledge, and for our staff as well to gather this knowledge on how to work with these individuals as they try to move forward, because the barriers that you pointed out in the beginning are very, very true. Going back to the welcome home session, I remember being there and candidates having to go through the process of what it's actually like to be released and the barriers that they're facing as far as living and housing and food and medical things on a short time frame in some situations. So
and
I think
then imagine the complication in 2020 where everything's closed.
Yes, I can only imagine. I truly can only imagine. And so I think this is definitely a great start. Having us all come together and share some ideas and thoughts and try to move forward. I am extremely excited to want to work with you some more going forward, because I truly believe in what you all are trying to do in the community and help these individuals move forward to be more productive after a life or a short time of incarceration to be better citizens for the state of Missouri.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Timothy. Hopefully I get to see you face to face again soon.
Hopefully so.
Okay. That's all I have. You have a little bit more time to take any of my information that you want, but the crew that put together this entire conference has all of my information as well, and I certainly hope to stay engaged and part of the conversation with Voc Rehab. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Brittany. And before everyone logs off, I just wanted to make a comment. Well, first of all, thank you so much. This is really not only an important conversation, but really appreciate the perspective that you bring in helping us all think maybe differently about how we have these conversations in our local communities. I think that's extremely important, as you explained, is how we approach these conversations. So I really thank you for that perspective. We will, I think the best way to get the materials out is we don't necessarily have like everyone's email addresses, but if you send an email to the MRA chapter, so MRA state chapter at gmail.com. And I think Jennifer may type that, if you don't mind, Jennifer, throwing that, there it is. So that's MRA state chapter at gmail.com. Send an email to that email address, and we will share the PowerPoint that Brittany shared, as well as CEUs. Just let us know if you want one or both, and that'll be the most efficient way to get those out. It may take a few days. We'll probably wait a few days to get all of those requests in. So, but just know that if you send it to that email address, we will respond. So once again, thank you, Brittany, so much. I want to thank everybody for logging in. I think at one point I saw 156 participants, so that's a fantastic turnout. So just kudos to everybody out there who took the time to join us. We will have our next Wednesday webinar, or Webinar Wednesday. I'm not sure which way it goes. Next week, same time, same place, where we'll be learning all about some best practices in pre-employment transition services here in Missouri as we serve youth with disabilities. So hopefully you all can join us for that.
Can I make one last plug?
Please do. Yeah.
A selfless plug for ourselves.
Go for it.
You're all depressed and inundated with all the negativity happening in the community. Let me offer opportunity for hope. Our program does a monthly profile series called Instilling Change. Go and follow our Facebook page. We are Second Chance KC. And we are going to have another profile out where we highlight a success story of someone who's come through the program and is seeing new life on the other side. The news is terrible right now with all the doom and gloom. So if you're looking for a breath of fresh air, we are also happy to help provide some of that positivity to you as well.
Wonderful. That's a great way to end. Thank you so much, Brittany. And thank you to everybody out there. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.